Known as Mahatma, or the Great Soul, during his lifetime, Mahatma Gandhi was the primary leader of the Indian independence movement, who practiced civil disobedience as a means of achieving his goals. Mahatma Gandhi was born in 1869 in the former British Empire. After completing his school education, he left for England to study law. After struggling to find work as a lawyer in India, he was hired by a law firm to work in South Africa. So, in 1893, Gandhi arrived in South Africa, which remained a British colony until 1910. Along with his wife and children, Gandhi remained in South Africa for nearly 20 years. Gandhi was appalled by the discrimination he experienced as an Indian immigrant in South Africa. A seminal moment in Gandhi's life occurred in 1893 during a train trip to Pretoria, South Africa, when a white man objected to his presence in the first-class railway compartment, although he had a ticket. Refusing to move to the back of the train, Gandhi was forcibly thrown off the train. That train journey served as a turning point for Gandhi, who became an outspoken critic of South Africa's discrimination policies. Gandhi extended his original one-year stay to assist Indians in opposing a bill to deny them the right to vote. Though unable to halt the bill's passage, his campaign was successful, drawing international attention to the plight of Indians in South Africa. When in 1970 the Asiatic Registration Act, known as the Black Act, was passed, Gandhi, along with many other Indians, refused to obey the law. The act required all Indians living in South Africa to register and be fingerprinted. Gandhi protested to prevent the Asiatic community from suffering intolerable humiliation. Gandhi came up with the concept of satyagraha, which in this context signifies nonviolent resistance to particular injustice like the registration law. Gandhi was arrested and put in jail, the first of many times he would be imprisoned for disobeying what he believed to be unjust laws. Following his release, he supported labor strikes and organized a massive non-violent march. Finally, after 7 years of protest, the South African government made important concessions to his demands, including recognition of Indian marriages and abolition of the Indian poll tax. He also negotiated a compromise to end the most objectionable parts of the registration law. Having achieved important goals, it was time for Gandhi to return to India, where he would become the leader of the Indian independence movement against British rule. Gandhi was already famous in India when he returned from South Africa in 1915. He set about organizing peasants, farmers and urban laborers to protest against excessive land tax and discrimination. He joined the Indian National Congress and assumed leadership in 1921. Gandhi was determined to fight for Indian self-rule, Swaraj, and led nationwide campaigns for various social causes. In 1919, the British passed the Rowlatt Acts, which authorized them to detain unwanted people indefinitely without trial. In response to the act, Gandhi organized a protest movement, which did, however, turn violent in many places, so he had to cancel it. Subsequently, Gandhi proclaimed an organized campaign of non-cooperation to induce the British government of India to grant self-government or Swaraj to India. The exploitation of Indian villagers had resulted in extreme poverty in the country and the virtual destruction of Indian home industries. Gandhi began to use his own portable spinning wheel to make his own clothes. The spinning wheel soon became a symbol of Indian self-reliance. The Rowlatt Acts were never actually implemented, but Gandhi was jailed for sedition in 1922. After his release from prison in 1924, he withdrew from active politics and devoted himself to propagating communal unity. The Salt March of 1930 is a good example of Gandhi's satyagraha, non-violent protest. Britain's Salt Acts did not only prohibit Indians from collecting or selling salt, but imposed a heavy tax on salt, a basic human necessity that hit the country's poor particularly hard. To protest against the government's salt tax, Gandhi, together with his followers, started a 240-mile march to the Arabian Sea. It began on the 12th of March 1930, when Gandhi and several dozen of his followers set out. The group grew larger as the days wore on. When they arrived, they picked up handfuls of salt along the shore, thus breaking the law. Once more, Gandhi was arrested, but he was released in 1931, halting the campaign after the British conceded to his demands. Limited salt production was granted, as well as the freeing of all the peaceful protesters from jail. Gandhi viewed it as a sure step on the road to independence. In 1932, Gandhi began new civil disobedience campaigns. Arrested twice, the Mahatma fasted for a long period several times. These fasts were effective measures against the British, because a revolution might well have broken out in India if he had died. Gandhi was dedicated to improve the status of the poorest in India. In 1934, Gandhi resigned not only as the leader, but also as a member of the Congress Party to focus on education, poverty, and the problem afflicting India's rural areas, which accounted for 85% of the population. World War II broke out, but the British government was not able to convince India to participate in the war. Instead, Gandhi launched the Quit India movement in 1942 that called for the immediate British withdrawal from the country. In a stirring speech in Bombay, Gandhi told his supporters, "There's a mantra, a short one, that I give you. The mantra is, do or die." Within a few hours of Gandhi's speech, most of the Indian National Congress leaders were swiftly arrested, including Gandhi himself. Large-scale demonstrations took place. Strikes were called and many workers remained absent. All across the country, crowds severed electricity and telephone wires and uprooted train tracks. Police opened fire. Mass detentions followed. The Quit India movement ultimately lacked organization, but remained significant because it intensified the opposition of India's population to the British and made the British realize that they would not be able to govern India successfully in the long run. British officers released Mahatma Gandhi from prison in 1944 due to poor health. Unable to stop strengthening calls for freedom, the British finally began negotiations for the independence of India. However, with the support of the Muslims led by Jinnah, the British planned to partition India into two, India and Pakistan. Since the majority of Indians were Hindu, the Muslims feared not having political power if there was an independent India. Both the Muslim League and the Congress Party accepted the partition of the subcontinent, against Gandhi's advice. On the 15th of August in 1947, Great Britain granted independence to India and the newly formed country of Pakistan. The British had left their troublesome colony behind. Both Muslims and Hindus were granted an independent state. However, these were incomplete victories. Up to 17 million people were eventually displaced, and 1 million killed in the sectarian violence that followed partition. Gandhi tried his best to promote peace. He commenced the last fast unto death of his life, which was terminated when representatives from both sides promised peace. A few days later, on the 30th of January 1948, while he was on his way to his evening prayer meeting in Delhi, he was shot down by a young Hindu fanatic. Some final notes. Gandhi lived a spiritual and ascetic life of prayer, fasting and meditation. He adopted a life of simplicity and austerity with about no possessions. The teachings of Gandhi inspired future human rights movements around the globe, notably in the US under the civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and under Nelson Mandela in South Africa.